Hi, my relatives. I hope you're all keeping good, enjoying this spring weather. I'm looking outside my window right now, and I'm just inspired to go for a run, so we're just going to do it after this. But before that, I do that, on this week's episode of our Storytellers, we're actually joined by my good friend, Kendall Hill. Kendall Hill is a proud member of the Turtle Clan from the Oneida Nation of the Thames. She is a daughter, a community member, and a leader. Kendall got her Bachelors of Business Administration from Trent University with a passion to use that education to advance economic and community development. Now, if you're accessing this from YouTube, you might be thinking, Riel, why release an episode that's 5 minutes long? And the truth is that I never intended for this YouTube video to be 5 minutes long, because the podcast is actually much longer than that. However, due to unfortunate circumstances and error in apprentice filmmakers, we have a camera that's not designed to record for longer than 30 minutes, and we usually have a workaround with this little device called an intervalometer. However, that intervalometer failed this time, so I'm sorry to Kendall, and I'm sorry to everybody watching this on YouTube or who usually gets their podcast from YouTube, because this one is kind of going to be a Spotify, Apple Music kind of audio exclusive. If you would like to support the podcast and support us purchasing new cameras, especially because we're looking to take this podcast on the road and take our equipment to people rather than have people come to my house, you can donate at Patreon, which is going to be in the link in the description down below. Now, on Patreon, we don't want you just to donate money for nothing. We do want to develop something that you would be interested in. So you'll definitely start receiving early access to episodes eventually. However, please let us know what else you're looking for. Are you looking for, the behind the scenes footage? Are you looking for, like our learnings, our mistakes? Like, let us know, and we'll be super happy to create some content for you on Patreon. However, when it comes to this episode, you're going to notice it's a little bit different. We kind of go through the introduction with Kendall. We get to know Kendall a little bit, but Kendall and I have had such good chats in the past, just in crossing, about current Indigenous events and stuff like that, that we wanted to do an episode like that. Now, this episode was recorded a few weeks back, so the current events might not be as current as they should have been. Kendall, to you, again, I apologize one more time. However, it was a lot of fun to go over a couple of different cases. In this episode, we talk about current events when it comes to pretendianism, taxation, lots of stuff. We try to take a balanced approach of one of us taking each side's case. I want everything, just take everything here with a grain of salt. Like, we don't know everything in the world, and we're just two young Indigenous professionals sitting down, trying to figure stuff out and simplify this complicated world. So without further ado, please welcome my good friend, Kendall Hill, to the podcast.
My name's Kendall Hill. I've lived in Vancouver for 4 years. I'm originally from Ontario. And so my traditional name is Gowitchijawi, and it means they give her flowers in the Oneida language. I'm from Oneida of the Thames First Nation, where my mother's from, but I am registered with the government from Six Nations of the Grand River, Upper Cayuga, under my dad.
Do you know anything about how the Confederacy kind of came together?
So I do. So back in the day, there were 5 nations. So the Confederacy first started as 5 nations, and it was the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Seneca, and the Cayuga. And they were all at war with one another, and they were killing each other and just kind of taking out each other. And at this time, the peacemaker came and brought peace to all the tribes. It's called the Great Law of Peace. I've never heard it in full. It takes weeks to recite sometimes. And I think it gets recited once a year or every few years, and all the nations take turns kind of hosting, where they recite it. And so the Great Law of Peace was brought to us by the peacemaker. And once he brought peace to all the tribes, we all buried our weapons under a white pine tree. And that's kind of how the Confederacy came to be. And we all stand at different doors and have different jobs within the Confederacy.
What was growing up like for you?
So I grew up in an urban small town. Was raised by my mom. I had 2 older siblings, 6 and 8 years older than me. But I guess I was the kid, my mom likes to say, that brought culture into the family, because I had to know, like, what does it mean to be what does it mean to be Indigenous? Don't just tell me I'm First Nations. So I needed to know my culture because my mom realized that that's what grounded me. And my mom left the reserve at 18. She had just a lot of intergenerational trauma, so she left and didn't look back, and wasn't really raised within her culture either. So there wasn't a lot of that. And then when I came, I had to know it. So we got involved within the Friendship Center. My mom actually worked within Aboriginal Head Start my entire life, even to this day, out here in British Columbia.
What are the mistakes that colonial organizations make when attempting to engage nations or communities?
Well, if you think about engagement, like the whole basis of engaging any community is to give decision-making power to the public, right? And to get their ideas in order to kind of take that in. Well, let's say, for example, the government of BC was running an engagement process for Indigenous communities for something. The idea would be to give these communities decision-making power, in a sense, right? But with nations, you have to take that one step further, because you have to remember self-governance and their sovereignty. And I think that's the hardest thing for any non-Indigenous community to do, and to hand that over to Indigenous communities, is because it doesn't align with like their repatrianization methods, in a sense, where Indigenous people have been leading like this rematry. I don't even know how to change that over. Just remembering like everything's shared. Everything's kind of gifted to us, right? Not by our ancestors, but by like the future generations.
Yeah.
Because we're the stewards of the time now that they'll be born into, right?
Yeah.
Some reserves just aren't at that point yet where they're equipped to be Six Nations, in a sense, with the economic development that they have happening. Reserves are fighting to get there. And I think reconciliation is happening amongst our people in healing, to ensure that that's where reconciliation happens intergenerationally, is healing our people. But I think when you still step foot onto a lot of reserves, it's a big culture shock to people. I was even just driving through the city the other day, and I was like, I wonder what the difference growing up on a reserve that's in the center of the city versus growing up in a reserve that's 30 minutes outside a town center. Like, I just wonder how those experiences correlate. What's similar and what's different.
Yeah.